Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl, the Brook Ashley, and today we are here to discuss The Real Housewives of Atlanta, Season 14, Reunion Part 2. And before we get into it, let me just quickly say that it was made abundantly clear that Andy definitely wants Marlo back on as a full-time peach holder for Season 15. The way he let Marlo have the floor, telling her story, he must have said that he was just so moved by her story and her upbringing and just so touched, and he just kept thanking her for sharing everything. I said, okay, Andy wants her back. He wants to give Marlo a second chance, and I'm thinking, I don't know why. And may I just add one more thing? There were several times during this reunion where Andy would ask them a question and then Andy would say, well, okay, let's talk about something else. And I'm like, no, I wanted to hear what they had to say about that. But with all that being said, let's just jump right on into this recap because you guys already know that we don't have a minute to spare. So we open up this second part with Marlo still discussing her life story about how she ran away from home at 10 years old and she was in foster care. And nobody on this cast could ever walk a mile in her shoes. Nobody knows what she's been through. So Marlo goes on and says, and none of these ladies can name one man that I've ever had sex with or gave head to, but they want to sit here and call me whores and prostitutes. And I was thinking, Marlo, can you not? Because you are the same person calling Kenya and Kandi sluts and whores when you were talking to Shereé at Sonya's cooking class. So what we won't do is act like you're this victim who's been called all these names. What I really can't stand about Marlo is she's somebody who weaponizes her life story and how she had a very sad childhood, and she uses that to justify why she acts so awful now. And again, you cannot use your life story or your trauma as an Uno card. Everybody has been through something. Effie, we all got pain. Like, let's not do this. If everybody else is able to function in this world despite what they've been through and not take it out on other people, then Marlo should be able to do the same thing too. Marlo is a grown woman. I think she's 46, 47 years old? Like, she is way too old to not know better. Going through a hard time does not give you the right to lash out on people just because. There are so many sources to get help nowadays. Marlo has the resources, so there is no excuse for her as to why she's still acting like this at her big age. So now Marlo says that she appreciates Sonya and Drew because Sonya called her up and let her know that what she said to Kandi was wrong. And it's like, again, Marlo, you are 46, 47 years old. You know right from wrong. So to act like you need this coddling and you need someone like Sonya to call you up and say that was wrong, that's pathetic. So now Kenya jumps in the conversation and she says that the things that Marlo says never match up to her actions because she talks about she's not a sexual person, she has a lot of issues with men, but then on the other hand, she's talking about Kandi can't keep a man because her cat wasn't good. So it's like when it comes to Marlo, she's a walking contradiction. And I agree. And I do find it strange that for somebody who is such a prude, she's quick to say that somebody can't keep a man because they're not good at sex, because, you know, it wasn't good. So it's very confusing to me. I'm like, girl, which one is it? And also, every time Marlo says that, she's reading herself. Because Marlo, we have yet to see you with the man, so what does that mean? That must mean that yours isn't good because you haven't had a man in, what, a decade? So it's like, again, you're trying to read somebody who has a husband, and meanwhile, back at the ranch, we've seen you with who? I'll wait. And before anybody tries me in the comments saying, well, you know, having a man isn't a prize, I know that. But I'm talking about from Marlo's mouth, she is always talking about somebody can't keep a man because of that. So I'm using her pea brain logic to say that when she says that, she's high-key reading herself. If we're going by what Marlo is saying, then that means that hers isn't too good or it's not working because why haven't we seen her with anybody? So I'm gonna need Marlo to retire that read because not only is it stale, but she's also embarrassing herself every time she says it. So now Sonya interjects and she says, I'm not trying to belittle or downplay anybody else's experiences with Marlo, but Marlo has been a very good friend to me and she treats me well. And I said, Sonya, stop being so goofy. If Marlo can turn on all these women on this couch, she will eventually turn on you. Just give it another season. Then we have Drew jumping in saying that she wants to love Marlo, but she just needs that consistency from Marlo. And I said, Drew, you are asking for something that you will never get, and it's best to just cut your losses now and keep Marlo in the acquaintance associate file because Marlo is not a friend. And you saw how quick Marlo was to throw it back in Drew's face about how Drew was calling her up when she had problems with Ralph. I said, Drew, that's a sign right there. Don't get too close. Because whatever you've told her too much already. So again, I wouldn't even put Marlo in the friend category. I would not pursue a friendship with her. I would keep her right there in that sweet spot. Associate, acquaintance. I see her out at social events. We talk. We have a little laugh or two. And that's that. So now Andy brings up the break-in that occurred at Marlo's a few months ago. And Marlo says that all of a sudden she hears her nephew screaming. And so she said some things to the intruders and they ran off. So now Andy starts reading off Kenya's tweet about how she was happy that Marlo and the boys were safe, but she thought that it was a bit strange that Marlo was withholding information about the robbery, but was happy to give interviews to the press. And she called it fake. Now, personally, I thought that that tweet was a bit of a reach from Kenya. I understand that you don't like Marlo, but I don't really know what more you wanted from her. She did tell everybody that she was robbed, so I don't know what info you were looking for. And so when Kenya said, well, I just said that because, Kandi had an incident, and then Marlo, and then Drew had a scare, so I wanted us to just jump on a conference call and just discuss what we can do to keep each other safe. Now, personally, if somebody's already targeting you, there's really not much you can do besides have a security system, hire a security team, and just hope and pray that that's enough to fend intruders off. So now we change gears in the conversation, and Andy brings up how Marlo received a lot of negative feedback and backlash about her kicking out her nephews. So Marlo says, first things first, I don't have the best delivery when I say things. I should have just said I needed a reset. So Marlo continues on by saying that she's used to being a single woman, doing her own thing, doing whatever she wants, whenever she wants. Then she says that she was afraid that she was going to start beating the boys the way that her mom beat her, and she was trying to protect her from herself. So Andy says, it really moves me every time I hear about your story, especially as a parent. But it just doesn't land to me the fact that you're doing the same thing to the boys that you experienced growing up. So now Kandi interjects and she says, especially when you told the story about the last home that you were in, you thought that was your place, you thought that was going to be your new family, and then when you came home one day and she told you to get out, pack your things and leave, I just felt like you've given your nephews this beautiful life, a beautiful home, they're in the best schools. I never thought that you would ever do the same thing that you experienced too. So Marlo says, I understand that. I'm sure that a lot of people feel that way, but foster parents take classes to help raise and take in foster kids. I didn't take any classes. Like, I came from the streets, I was abused, and I'm figuring this stuff out on my own. And when Marlo said that she now has a therapist and a life coach, I said, won't he do it?
Thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you.
Because the way I have been screaming from the rooftops that Marlo needs to see somebody, I pray that Marlo sticks with therapy for at least 5 years. So here are my final thoughts when it comes to Marlo throwing her boys out for 30 days. I'm not a parent. I have never been in a situation like that, but I would like to believe that if I did take future nieces or nephews in, that I would stick to it, commit to raising them, and that I wouldn't, throw in the towel if things got tough. Decisions like those are so important and you should not take it lightly. I just think that Marlo probably wasn't ready for this responsibility, and maybe it would have been best if another relative had taken them in. In my personal opinion, I just don't think that Marlo has the emotional capacity to deal with raising kids. But I really do hope that Marlo is implementing the tools that she's learning in therapy and from her life coach, so that way she doesn't get this upset again or she makes a rash decision and kicks them out again. Now, was anybody else screaming when Andy was asking Marlo had she seen her sister or talked to her sister? And when Marlo said, no, I haven't heard from her. And then Kenya interrupts and says, Andy, can I have a tissue, please? And then Andy says, sure, you need a tissue because you're moved by Marlo's story. And she was like, no, because my nose is cold. And then when Andy turned around and was like, thank you again, Marlo, for sharing your story. And then Marlo said, thank you for letting me tell it. And then Kenya said under her breath, it's called damage control. And I said Kenya was 100% correct, because that's all I saw while Marlo was crying and retelling what she had been through. Like I've said, we have heard Marlo's story millions of times, and there have still been no changes in her behavior. It is always the same song and dance, but the behavior is still the same. So Marlo heard Kenya say it's called damage control under her breath. So now she starts calling Kenya an evil bitch. And then she says, she's always putting me down, but you know what? I love it. I'm used to the abuse. And once again, Marlo is just very calculated, very manipulative. That poor woe is me. Oh my gosh, did you hear what she said about me? But I'm used to it though. Kenya just beats me down. And it's like, but Marlo, we all see how you act. It's not like Kenya gets on you for no reason. You started, she finishes it, and now you want to cry. And like I always say, you cannot be the victim and the villain at the same time. You have to pick a side. So we jump off of Marlo finally because I was getting tired of talking about Marlo and what she has going on. I said, thank God. So now Andy brings up how production was the shadiest of them all this season. And like I had said in other recaps, somebody needs to give the people in production a raise because the edits this season had me in tears. So Andy's asking the ladies if they expected production to be super shady to them this season, and they all say no. And then he wants to know, because of production, is there more pressure to be honest and just lay out all the receipts or no? So they all say, of course. And then Kenya says, no, some people don't care about production outing them because they're just going to lie anyway. And the first person who came to mind was Shereé Whitfield, because it doesn't matter how many times production will shade Shereé and show that she's lying, Shereé will still lie anyway. I feel like Shereé might be one of those rare people who doesn't feel embarrassment, and that's the reason why she's always taking L's, because she doesn't care. Because the rest of us have a thing called pride and shame, and we have common sense where we wouldn't even do certain things like not paying people because we'd look crazy. But I don't think that Shereé is capable of actually feeling crazy, hence why we see the decisions that she makes. Like dating somebody in jail for 8 years, spending 10 years building a house, just outright cheating people out of money that she owes, not paying bills, buying Aston Martins to get them repossessed by the end of the season, like stuff like that. It just shows that maybe she's unable to feel embarrassment. So now Andy's asking Drew, how did it feel for her and Ralph to watch this season back, especially when production was clowning Ralph regarding him gaslighting her. So Drew says, of course, it was hard to watch, but you know, we talked it out and we moved past it, but Ralph was upset. So then Drew says that she had never heard the word gaslighting in regards to Ralph. And I said, now, Drew, there's a big part of me that doesn't believe that for a minute. I think that you have heard, probably your mom, your therapist. You've seen all of us viewers say that he gaslights you, so you definitely heard those words in regards to your husband. So I wasn't believing that for a minute. I think that she was trying to save face because she's embarrassed. So now Andy reads a viewer question to Marlo, asking Marlo if she's happy that she got the surgery for her edges. So Marlo says that she's so happy about her edges, and she's even happier that she went to Drew's surgeon to get it done. Now, when Andy turned to Kenya and was like, Kenya, do you think that Marlo needs Kenya more hair care? And Kenya was like, I mean, yeah, some people have further to go than others. I couldn't stop laughing. I said, Andy is so shady and so messy. He knows he was wrong for that. And I actually was surprised to hear that Marlo does use Kenya Moore hair care. She was like, yeah, you know, I bought it from CVS. I love it. It helps with my edges and I use it all the time. And that's what trips me up the most about Marlo, because for somebody who hates Kenya so much, she's obsessed with Kenya. Like, you can't stand this woman, but now you're kissing her ass, talking about how great her products are, how much you love her products, how you use them all the time. It's like, what's going on? And even Kenya wasn't amused. She was like, okay, girl, like, you're the one person that I don't need to have as a customer. So now Andy reads a viewer question asking Shereé if she was ever embarrassed for being clowned about her joggers being out in spring, summer, or September. So Shereé says, well, you know, it did get to be a little bit much at times, but at the end of the day, the joggers are out, like they're here. And I said, girl, your joggers just finally came out 2 weeks ago, and it's been a hot mess ever since. Because you're sitting up there copying designs from Shein, Fashion Nova, and Amazon, and then you want to sell these cheap joggers for over $200. And when I tell you, Andy knows exactly when to be messy, because then he brought up how Kandi already had her Bitch I'm Worldwide shirts up and running in less than a month's time. So he was like, you know, Kandi, how are your shirts doing? And Kandi says they're doing well. People love them. The shirts are selling out. And you could see that Shereé looked so hurt about it, because it took you 14 years and Kandi has come out with a plethora of products and restaurants in all that time. And then came out with some new shirts in less than a month's time. So I know you feel stupid. One thing that nobody can ever take away from Kandi, Kandi gets to the bag, okay? And she moves fast.
Bling, bling, bling. Bitches is mad.
So now we get to the Kenya portion of this reunion, and Andy's asking all the ladies if they notice a change in Kenya. So they all say yes. Kandi says that when they started filming, Kenya still had all this great energy around her because she was also filming Dancing with the Stars. Now let me quickly say this. I am just now in Team Twirl, okay? I always thought that Kenya was mean, enjoyed being the villain, just awful. I'll be the first to admit that. My opinion of Kenya changed when she got on Real Housewives Ultimate Girls Trip, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think that I'm actually starting to like Kenya. I never thought that I would say that. And then seeing her this season, she was very enjoyable to watch. I still stand by how I felt about Kenya when she first joined this show, but I have to say that ever since the Ultimate Girls Trip and this season, there's definitely been a huge change in Kenya. I enjoy watching Kenya. We see more sides of her personality. And I know that there's a very good portion of you guys who you felt the same way about Kenya as I did, and you just started liking her after you watched the Ultimate Girls Trip. So I think that it's safe to say that everybody saw the change in Kenya. So Kenya says that she always loved dancing. When she was a little girl, her grandma would take her to the free dance classes at the community center because they couldn't afford dance lessons. And being on Dancing with the Stars was a way for her to honor her grandmother. So then she gets choked up and she says that she just loved the experience, she had a great time, and it brought back the memories of when her grandma would come to her dance recitals. And I watched the season that Kenya was on. She was on, Iman Shumpert was on. That was a really good season. But Kenya did do a great job. You could see how much she enjoyed it, she liked it a lot, and she was having a lot of fun. So now Andy brings up Kenya's ongoing divorce. We learned that the divorce is at a standstill. Andy says, is he asking for money? Like, what's going on? And she says, no, he's not asking for anything. It's just that, it's at a standstill right now. And until they get a trial date or settle, it's gonna be ongoing. Now, personally, I'm super confused. I don't understand how it's at a standstill. Kenya's divorce reminds me so much of Bethany Frankel with that crazy guy she was with, Jason, because their divorce went on for like 8 years and they were only married for 2. So it's like the same situation, a hot mess. So now Andy reads a viewer question directed to Sonia about did she understand Kenya's frustration regarding the couples trip comments when they were going to Jamaica. So Sonia clears things up. She says, well, I was just trying to let Kenya know that she could bring a +1 because when we were in New York, she kept complaining about how she was unaware that it was a couples trip and that Kandi didn't tell her. So then she says, I think where I went wrong was I told Shereé and Marlo they could bring any +1, like a friend, a family member, a man, it didn't matter. But when I spoke to Kenya, I kept saying it's a couples trip. I'm glad that Sonia could own up to the fact that her communication was what led Kenya to be upset, because Sonia did make it seem like Kenya had to bring a man. The way she kept stressing, well, it's a couples trip, so you have to bring somebody. Anybody's gonna assume that you want me to bring a man. Bottom line, Sonia should have told Kenya the same thing that she told Marlo and Shereé, and there wouldn't have been any confusion. So now Andy reads a viewer question asking Kenya if she regrets hanging up on Sonia. So Kenya says no, but she does regret the one time that she hung up on her grandma, and her grandma came over and whooped her ass. So Andy says, well, would you have regretted if Sonia had went to your house and beat your ass for hanging up on her? And then Sonia says, that's what I should have done. So now they're all laughing. And I said, Sonia, please, you can barely string a sentence together and read somebody, so I highly doubt you could beat anybody up. But Kenya, I have to be fair. When you hung up on Sonia like that, I understood that you were upset, rightfully so, but that was very disrespectful of you to do that. And Kenya, we know how you are because you would have been really pissed had somebody hung up on you. So Andy brings up the iFit drama. I was like, oh my gosh, not again. So Andy says, Kenya and Shereé, I just don't understand why you guys were so upset about not going to the shoot. If it had been me, I would have picked the boat ride over going to the shoot. And then he says, and Sonia clearly said that it didn't matter if you guys didn't show up because she had the boat ready for you guys. So Kenya says, well, I wanted to go to the shoot because I had missed something really important the day before, and I wanted to show Sonia that I was there for her. And I didn't want Sonia to think that I was letting her down. So Sonia makes it clear that she never thought anything of the sort, that never crossed her mind, that when she saw Marlo on the bus to go to the shoot, she just assumed that Shereé and Kenya decided not to go, and that was cool. Then Sonia says, you guys could have just said, how did the shoot go? And we could have moved on from there. And personally, I stand by what I said, that was blown up out of proportion. I didn't think that it was that big of a deal. They had a great time on the boat, and Sonia did make it clear that if they didn't go, she wasn't going to be upset. It was a very informal invite. You could go if you wanted to go. If you didn't want to go, that was cool too. So I was kind of annoyed and confused as to why Kenya and Shereé were just that upset. So now Andy reads a viewer question asking Shereé, what does she mean when she told Sonia to handle Kenya? So Kenya's like, yeah, girl, I want to know what you meant by that too. So you have Shereé doing all that nervous laughter. And so she says, well, I just meant that Kenya's very aggressive and sometimes she won't respect you unless you stand up to her. Now, I was thinking, Shereé, you are the last person to call anybody aggressive. Not the same Shereé who every time she gets mad, she has the veins popping out of her forehead. But I said, Shereé, you're the wrong one to talk about anybody being aggressive. We can count on one hand how many times we've seen Shereé cry on this show. Shereé never shows emotion. She's very stoic, very dry, a very hard shell. So I said, once again, sis, you're not the warmest or the softest in this group. And Shereé is also very two-faced to me. She's always going between people, telling one person this, telling another person this, to stir up mess, and to have them fighting while she gets to walk away scot-free. And I don't understand how people don't see that Shereé is actually one of the biggest instigators on this cast. I have to admit, I was in tears when Andy said to Shereé, did you mean that Sonya needs to handle Kenya like Pookie? And I was like, Andy loves all the black sayings. He really enjoys the black franchises. Now, in the midst of all this, Martell calls Shereé. Andy snatched the phone out. He's like, hey, Martell, how are you? So Shereé ends the phone call because obviously they're still filming the reunion. And so Andy's like, Shereé, I have to say, Martell is a 10 out of 10. Personally, I can't get excited over a serial cheater who did his ex-wife the way he did her. And then for him to just abandon his mistress who he had the kid with, I'm like, I just don't get all the hype. I really don't. He's a liar, a cheater, a narcissist, like, I don't get it. But you know, when it comes to men, Shereé really knows how to pick them. So if she likes it, then God bless. And I also feel like they're both using each other for publicity and storylines. Because after She by Shereé, what's going to be Shereé's storyline to keep her for season 15? So it looks like we'll be seeing some Martell Holt appearances for this upcoming season. Now Andy brings up the whole thing of Ross getting up and saying, don't F with my wife when they were in Jamaica. Sonya says that there's no better feeling than the person that you love speaking up for you and standing by your side. And while I understand that, Sonya and Ross, you both knew what you were signing up for when you signed on to do Real Housewives of Atlanta. The premise of this show is shading, reading, getting into arguments, and then resolving things. So for you to be so sensitive when your husband needs to say something, then maybe this might not be the show for you. I could see if Kenya and Shereé were screaming or cursing or throwing things, but the argument was nothing crazy where he had to stand up and say that. So now Andy's asking Sonya, how would she feel if Ralph or Todd stood up and said the same thing? So Sonya says, well, let's be clear, because Ross wasn't talking directly to Shereé or Kenya, and he wasn't cursing at anybody. So Kenya says, I completely understand that. And Ross is a sweet guy. He barely says 2 words. Now, I have to say, I was happy to see that they were able to gloss over Sonya and Kenya's arguments throughout the season because it really wasn't that deep. And it wasn't that interesting for us to just keep discussing. So now Andy switches gears and he's like, Kenya, I have to circle back to you. What in the world made you think that playing that game at your daughter's birthday party would be a good idea? So Kenya says, well, I thought that it was going to be fun shade. I didn't think that it was going to go left the way it did. Now, Kenya, you have been on this show for what? 8 seasons, 9 seasons? You know better. So now Andy brings up the whole Kandi sucks dick in a locker room question, and he wants to know how Kandi felt about it. So before Kandi can even get a word out, Shereé interrupts. And did you guys notice how fast Shereé was talking? She made no sense. She kept saying, well, you know, what's wrong with that? Because, you know, we all know, everybody knows that Kandi likes sex. So, you know, she probably did do it. So Kandi says, well, if that's the case, then I'm sure you've done the same thing too. So Shereé says, well, you know, I have done it, but just not in a locker room. And it was so funny how nobody had anything to say when Andy said, well, does anybody want to confess as to who wrote that question for Kandi? And they were all sitting there. I said, I will bet money that either Shereé or Marlo wrote that question. So now we get to the Sonya portion, and we're going to breeze through this because not a whole lot happened because Sonya is kind of boring. But Andy's asking Sonya, what was harder, running the Olympics or being on the Housewives? She says being on the Housewives for sure. I wasn't surprised that she said that because Sonya definitely had a rough first season. She came in flip-flopping, not making too much sense, losing in all the arguments she got into, throwing these awful cheap parties. So yeah, I would say that being on Housewives and being clowned is a lot harder than running and training for the Olympics. So Andy wants to know the timeline for baby number 2, because remember in the finale, Sonya took her IUD out, and now her and Ross are actively trying for another child. Sonya says that if she doesn't have the baby by the end of the year, then she's putting the IUD right back in. And so Andy wants to know what changed, because throughout the season, she did not want to have another kid. And then all of a sudden, it was like, okay, you know, we can have another baby. So Sonya says that she felt like Ross wasn't listening to her. And then at the end, he saw things her way. And that changed her mind to want to have another child. And then Sonya says that her and Ross are in a great place now. And she actually always wanted to have a big family. It's always been a dream of hers. I don't know if I'm buying this whole we're happy, he understands where I'm coming from, I want to have another baby now. I don't know. I think that Sonya might be feeling some pressure from Ross. Maybe she's afraid that he might leave if she does not have another child. Like, I don't know. But I don't know if I'm buying what she's trying to sell us. But ultimately, I do hope that whatever she chooses is her decision and she's happy with the decision. So now Andy reads a viewer question to Drew, and the question reads, Drew, I was shocked to hear you say that it's pretty much a woman's duty to do whatever the husband wants. And do you believe that it's a woman's duty to please her husband even if it causes the woman resentment? So Drew says, look, that wasn't the whole conversation, and I do feel like the wife should please her husband the same way that the husband should please the wife. Now Sonya jumps in and says, but Drew, you doubled down on the comments when we were both on Watch What Happens Live. So Drew's upset and she says, Sonya, you asked me a question, I was giving you advice, and there was no ill intent behind what I was trying to tell you. I was even asking you, is it medical reasons? Like, what is it? Now, while Drew might not have had any ill intent in what she was saying to Sonya, I definitely cringed. I was thinking, Drew, Sonya has a right to feel the way she feels, and for you to tell her, well, give him a baby or somebody else might, like, what? Like, that's a very big decision. And if she's content with having a small family, then that should be her right. And I didn't like when you said, but that's your husband, and don't you want to please your husband? Like, she has to put how she feels to the side because his feelings matter more. I didn't like that. No offense, Drew, but it does seem like in your marriage to Ralph that you kind of put your feelings aside because you're afraid of Ralph. I always get the impression that you're walking on eggshells in your own home because you're so scared of pissing Ralph off. So Sonya says, you know, with all the issues that you've had in your marriage, I thought that you would have some compassion for me, but instead you made me feel like, dang, I'm supposed to give my husband another child even if I don't want it. Now, Sonya, you're an adult. Don't put so much stock in what other people have to say. It's your decision at the end of the day. Whether Drew feels the same or not, only you can make that decision. Drew's opinion should not matter that much, in your family planning decisions. So now we jump to the Kenya versus Marlo segment. Andy wants to know if they can pinpoint where their beef started from. So Andy says, well, Kenya, I know why it started with you when she was talking about your mother, but Marlo, I want to know, what's your issue with Kenya? So here goes Marlo playing the victim, and she says that Kenya uses her when she wants her and then discards her when she doesn't want her, and how Kenya has always been dismissive. While Kenya has never been any saint or any angel, Marlo, what we're not going to do is lie. Marlo, just admit that you're the cause of why you two aren't friends. Why is that so difficult? And for you to say that Kenya dismisses you, that's not true. I remember that you and Kenya had a very flourishing friendship at one point. You guys just loved each other. So now to hear that, she dismisses me and uses me and discards me, that's a lie. So now Andy reads a viewer question asking Marlo all the hateful things that she said to Kenya. How was she confused at Kenya not wanting to be her friend? So Marlo says, I understand it now. She'll never forgive me. She's never forgiven me. And then she says the only time that Kenya liked Marlo was when she was trying to get Marlo to not be friends with Portia. So now Kenya's mad and she says, girl, stop, because you threw Portia under the bus too, and you didn't like her either. So now Drew jumps in and says, I also heard that you had an issue with me because I was friends with Portia. Now, when Portia's name got brought up, I said, I will bet you all money that Portia will be coming back for season 15. And also, the blogs keep saying that that's the real reason why her and Simon haven't gotten married yet, because she's waiting for a big payday, and Bravo actually does want to capture the wedding on camera. So I said, yeah, I won't be surprised. So now Andy reads another viewer question asking Marlo, does she really think that Kenya will ever be her friend again after she has repeatedly disrespected her? So of course Marlo can't be mature about anything. So she's being sarcastic and she says, no, I don't know how I'm gonna get through it though. Like, Kenya doesn't want to be my friend anymore. I don't know what to do with myself. She used to call me and the boys every day. And I was like, Marlo, seriously, can you just grow up for a minute? Is everything always a joke to you? Like, I don't understand why you can't just own up and say, you know what? I was awful. I said some really awful things to Kenya. I apologize. And whether she forgives me or not, I own up to the part that I played in the demise of our friendship. So here's where things go left. Kenya's pissed and she calls Marlo a sociopath. And then she says, and that's why your real name isn't even Marlo Hampton, it's LaToya Hutchinson. So they're all like, wait, what? So now Marlo throws some shade at Kenya and she's like, are you caught up with the IRS yet? And Kenya says, I'm comfortable. What about you? Where's your income? So they're going back and forth. And then Kenya says, girl, you can't even show proof of your income. Like, you'll get your income from your Square reader.
You know what? This is too much.
So now Andy reads a viewer question asking Kenya and Marlo if the reason why they don't like each other is that they have a parent-child relationship going on, where since their parents hurt them, that's why they hurt each other. So Kenya says, no, that's not the case. When it comes to Marlo, she's dragged everybody in this room. She's even dragged her own nephews. She even drags her own mother, always talking about her mom being in and out of jail and how her mom is on drugs. So Marlo denies it and says that she's not dragging her mom, she's just discussing her reality. So now Kenya brings up how Marlo has never talked about her jail stints, and Marlo's like, what are you talking about? I brought it up many times before. So now Kenya says, well, let's talk about how you slashed that woman in her face. So Marlo is livid. She's calling Kenya a lying bitch. She's like, why are you lying on me? Stop lying. You better give me an apology once I prove that you're lying. Now, I noticed that when they started talking about jail time, Miss Shereé Whitfield was awfully quiet because back in the day, Miss Mamas was stealing out of Saks and she had her little mugshot too. I said some things never change. Shereé didn't like paying then, and she hates paying folks now. I said, yeah, that's probably why she never goes back to visit Ohio. That Cleveland Sachs probably has a picture with a wanted sign, like, don't let this lady back in our store. So we learned that Marlo got into a fight with a girl that she knew in the club, and she was in the county jail in Tampa for 6 months. She says that she's never been to prison, only jail. So Andy wants to know that after that jail stint, did she ever go back? So Marlo says that when she got out of jail, she was on house arrest, but she kept violating house arrest to go to the club. So because of that, she had violations, and then she went back to jail. And then she says that the last violation was for a check under $100 to her college of University of South Florida. So Kenya says, girl, stop. You probably forged papers to get through college in the first place. So then Marlo says that her last arrest was in her 20s. And then she says that Kenya's trying to bury her with this information. Now, Marlo, we know how you operate. If the shoe were on the other foot, like if Kenya had been to jail multiple times, you would be bringing it up in every single argument, every single conversation. For you to act like you're a victim and somebody's trying to embarrass you, it's on the internet. Anybody with a computer can type your name in and it will all pop up. So now we get to the last segment, and it is Drew versus Shereé and how their friendship never seemed to get off the ground. So Andy reads a viewer question asking Shereé, if Shereé claims that Anthony was never her assistant, then why is he labeled assistant on her phone? So here goes Shereé. Every time Shereé is lying, she starts talking a mile a minute. So she says, well, with me, I give everybody in my phone a title. I have 15 assistants, 15 makeup artists, 10 painters in my phone, like everybody has a title. I said, Shereé, I don't believe a word of it. I don't believe that you just give everybody a title in your phone. So now Andy's asking Drew if she believed what Anthony was telling her regarding Shereé. So Drew says, well, it's not that I believed it. I just felt like I shouldn't be hearing this. Like, it's not my business. So here's where things get crazy. Andy's like, Shereé, did you ever confront Anthony about what he was saying about you? And she says, of course I did. And he denied it. And Andy's like, but we saw him on the show joke around about how you don't pay anybody. So now here goes Shereé sounding just as delusional as she wants to sound. And she says, well, you know, it's a running joke at this point. Like, that's the narrative that they all say about me. But I wouldn't be as blessed as I am if I didn't pay people. I was like, Shereé, you just admit in the first part of this reunion that you don't pay people. We saw you cheat Drew and not give her the $13.50 that you owe her. What are you talking about? I brought out the receipts in last week's recap about how you were sued by multiple landscapers and contractors because you did not pay them. You don't pay people. It's a fact. It's not an opinion. It's not an assumption. You don't pay. You have a history of stiffing people. Like, who are you trying to fool? So since they're on the topic of paying people, Andy reads a viewer question asking Drew if she pays all of her assistants or are they unpaid interns. I said the shade of it all, because if you watch New York, then you know that Sonia Morgan only has unpaid interns, and she has them doing all this work for her. So Drew says that she pays all of her people, treats all of them well, and then Shereé says, but Anthony told me that you didn't pay him. He's still waiting on a check. So Drew says, oh no, girl, we're not you. Me and Ralph actually pay people, and Anthony's car was about to be repossessed, and we paid that off too, and he was very thankful. I said, not Drew putting Anthony's business all out on the streets. I said, not repossessed. So now Andy reads a viewer question asking Drew, why is she acting like Anthony didn't say that Ralph was gay? So Drew says, because he didn't say it, that's what he told me. So now Drew pulls out her phone and she plays a voice recording of Anthony denying the whole thing. So now we have Shereé FaceTiming Anthony, and off rip, you already know what type of time Anthony's on. He's up there talking about, hey, beautiful, how you doing? And I said, Anthony's just so fraudulent and so phony. Because you sat up there dogging Shereé out earlier on in the season, and now it's, hey, beautiful, how are you? Like, really? So Shereé says, we're at the reunion right now, and I have to clear some things up. Were you ever my assistant? And Anthony says, no, I wasn't. Then she says, do I owe you any money? Did I ever not pay you? And he says, no, you don't owe me any money. So now Shereé says, Drew just played this recording of you. And so Andy cuts in and he says, look, Drew just played this tape where you're denying ever calling Ralph gay. Did you call Ralph gay, yes or no? And the way the lies jumped out, you have Anthony making no sense. He's talking about, no, I don't think I said that. Well, I don't recall if I said it, but, you know, if I did say it, then it was some time ago. But honestly, I don't think that Ralph is gay. But I do think that Drew needed a storyline to get on the show. So they're all like, what? And so Sonya says, this guy is something else. Drew, let this be a lesson to you. Stop befriending people who are thirsty to be in front of the camera. From jump, Anthony was desperate. He was a wannabe. He was doing way too much. I thought all his antics were over the top. You could tell that that was somebody who was dying to be in front of the camera. Drew, I would never speak to Anthony again. Anthony would be dead to me. For him to flip it on her and say that she needed a storyline, that was crazy. I said, wow, this woman helped you out. You were in her house around her kids. She was paying you. People like Anthony are dangerous to be around because they will switch up on you in a minute. And you could see that Andy was so over it. He was like, okay, Anthony, bye. Like, thank you very much for your time, but bye. We'll talk to you later. Anthony, if I were you, I'd be so embarrassed and so ashamed because you've burned so many bridges now. I'd be embarrassed. But that's where the second part of this reunion ends. And honestly, we don't need 3 parts. This could have been a 2-parter. I'm annoyed that we still have 1 more week left. I'm like, okay, what else is there to talk about? But y'all, that was my recap. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you all so much for watching, and you guys already know what to do. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all later. Bye.